You have roughly 4,000 weeks to live, maybe 3,000 if you're already an adult, possibly fewer if life surprises you. And right now, at this very moment, you're spending one of those weeks. It's gone. You'll never get it back. The only question is, are you spending it on what actually matters? Carl Jung spent his life studying how people waste their limited time, not on obviously frivolous things, but on seemingly important pursuits that create nothing meaningful, career achievement that feels empty, relationship maintenance that lacks depth, constant busyness that produces no consciousness, lives that look productive but feel hollow. Jung discovered that most people don't realize life is short until it's nearly over. Then, in their final years, they look back with devastating clarity. They spent decades on things that didn't matter. They avoided what was essential. They performed what others expected instead of living what they actually valued. They wasted their limited existence on unlimited distractions. I'm about to show you Jung's framework for spending your short life wisely. Not doing more, but doing what actually creates meaning. Not achieving more, but becoming more conscious. Not filling your time, but using it for what matters. If you're not sure you're spending your weeks wisely, this might save you from the regret Jung saw in countless people who realized too late how they had wasted their one life. Here's what Jung observed. Most people live as if they have infinite time. They postpone what matters. They tolerate what drains them. They spend years on things they don't care about, telling themselves someday they'll do what's actually important. Then someday never comes. Life ends, and they die with their real life unlived. Jung called this provisional life, living as if your real life will start later, after you've checked all the boxes society told you to check. After the degree, the career, the house, the retirement, you're living provisionally, preparing for a life you'll start living once you've finished preparing. But Jung discovered the preparation becomes the life. You spend all your time getting ready to live and never actually live. This creates the devastating pattern Jung saw constantly. People reach midlife or late life and realize they've spent decades on the wrong things. They built careers they don't care about. They maintained relationships that lack authenticity. They pursued goals that meant nothing once achieved. They were busy their entire lives but never actually lived. The tragedy isn't that they were lazy or irresponsible. It's that they spent their precious, limited time on things that seemed important but created no real meaning. They were productive but not purposeful. They were busy but not alive. They were achieving but not becoming. Jung's question, the question that defines whether you're spending your short life wisely, is simple. What are you actually doing with your limited weeks? Not what you plan to do someday. What are you doing now, today, this week, with the irreplaceable time you're currently spending? What follows are 4 principles Jung considered essential for spending your short life wisely. Not productivity hacks, not time management techniques, but fundamental reorientations to what actually matters in a limited existence. Jung's first principle for a short life: ruthlessly eliminate what doesn't matter. Not someday, now. Because most of what you're spending your limited time on is psychological waste. Activities that produce no consciousness, no depth, no real meaning. And you're treating them as if they're essential. Here's what Jung understood. Your culture, your family, your conditioning have filled your life with obligations, expectations, and activities that seem necessary but aren't. You think you have to do them. But Jung would ask, according to whom? Who decided these things are essential? Are you doing them because they actually matter to you, or because you've unconsciously accepted that they should matter? Jung called this the tyranny of the inessential. Your life gets consumed by things that don't actually serve your development, express your nature, or create meaning. You're maintaining relationships out of obligation rather than genuine connection. You're pursuing achievements because you're supposed to, not because they align with your values. You're filling your time with busyness that keeps you from facing what's actually essential. But here's the brutal truth Jung insisted on. You don't have time for all this. Your life is too short to spend it on things that don't matter. Every hour you give to the inessential is an hour you're not giving to the essential. Every week you spend on obligation is a week you're not spending on meaning. You think you can do it all, balance everything, fit the essential in around the edges. But you can't. Your life will end, and you'll have spent it on what didn't matter. Think about your current week. What are you spending time on? How much is genuinely essential? Activities that create consciousness, express your authentic self, or generate real meaning? And how much is waste? Obligations you've accepted without questioning, expectations you're fulfilling without caring, busyness that exists only to avoid what's actually important. Jung observed that people defend their waste fiercely. They explain why every obligation is necessary, every expectation is unavoidable, every busy activity is important. But Jung would say, you're defending your waste because facing what's essential is terrifying. It's easier to stay busy with the inessential than to face what you're avoiding by staying busy. The practice Jung insisted on, radical elimination. Look at your life honestly. What are you doing that doesn't actually create meaning, express your nature, or develop consciousness? Not what seems important to others. What actually matters to you? Then stop doing what doesn't matter, not gradually, now. Because you don't have time to waste years on the inessential before you finally get to the essential. This doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or abandoning all obligations. It means distinguish between genuine responsibility and accepted waste. Genuine responsibility serves something you actually value. Accepted waste serves only the avoidance of living authentically. One is essential, the other is theft of your limited life. Jung would say, if you're spending your short life on what doesn't matter, you're committing the ultimate theft, stealing your own existence. Stop it. Eliminate the waste. Protect your limited time for what actually creates the meaning you'll want to have lived when your time runs out. But eliminating waste only creates space. The second principle addresses what to do with that space. Jung's second principle, in your short life, prioritize becoming conscious over achieving things. Because achievements disappear, but consciousness you develop stays with you, and might be the only thing you take when life ends. Here's the reorientation Jung insisted on. Your culture teaches you to measure life by achievements, degrees earned, positions reached, money accumulated, projects completed. These external markers become how you judge whether you're spending your life wisely. But Jung discovered, achievement creates no lasting meaning unless it generates consciousness. And often, the pursuit of achievement prevents consciousness development. Jung called this the achievement trap, organizing your life around external accomplishments while your internal development stagnates. You're getting more successful, but not more conscious. You're producing more, but understanding less. You're busy achieving, but not actually growing. And at the end of your short life, you'll have a resume full of achievements and a consciousness that never developed beyond where it started. But here's what Jung observed. People who prioritize consciousness over achievement often achieve more meaningful things anyway. Because consciousness development makes you more authentic, more aligned, more purposeful. Your achievements start flowing from who you actually are rather than from who you think you should be. The achievements become expressions of consciousness rather than distractions from it. Think about how you're currently spending your time. How much goes toward achievement? Career advancement, financial accumulation, status improvement, impressive accomplishments, and how much goes toward consciousness, understanding your shadow, processing your wounds, exploring your depths, becoming more aware of your unconscious patterns. Most people spend 90% of their time on achievement and maybe 10% on consciousness, if that. Then they wonder why their achievements feel empty, why success doesn't satisfy, why they've accumulated so much externally but feel so hollow internally. It's because they've spent their short life building an impressive external structure on a shallow internal foundation. Jung's invitation: reverse the priority. Make consciousness development your primary focus. Make achievement secondary, something that happens as a byproduct of consciousness, not as a substitute for it. Spend your limited time understanding yourself, integrating your shadow, processing your material, becoming more aware. This doesn't mean abandoning achievement or becoming unproductive. It means, when you have limited time and energy, invest it first in consciousness development. Do the inner work. Face your shadow. Process your wounds. Understand your patterns. Then let achievement flow from that consciousness rather than using achievement to avoid consciousness. At the end of your life, you won't care about your achievements. You'll care about whether you became conscious, whether you knew yourself, whether you lived authentically, whether you developed beyond where you started. The achievements you spent decades pursuing will be irrelevant. The consciousness you developed will be everything. The second principle: prioritize consciousness over achievement in your short life. Make internal development more important than external accumulation, because consciousness is what actually develops meaning, and meaning is what you'll want to have created when your limited time ends. But this leads directly to Jung's third principle about what consciousness development actually requires. Jung's third principle for spending your life wisely: whatever you're avoiding is probably what's most essential. The work you're resisting, the conversation you're postponing, the truth you're denying, that's where your development is waiting. And you're wasting your limited time avoiding exactly what you most need to face. Here's what Jung discovered: people are psychologically brilliant at avoiding what's essential. They fill their lives with pseudo-important activities specifically to avoid what's actually important. They stay busy so they don't have to face their wounds. They focus on others' problems so they don't have to address their own. They pursue external achievements so they don't have to confront internal emptiness. Jung called this the flight from the self. You're spending your short life running from exactly what you most need to face. The relationship conversation you're avoiding is the one that would create real intimacy. The career question you're postponing is the one that would align you with your authentic path. The grief you're numbing is the one that would deepen you if you felt it fully. The shadow material you're denying is exactly what needs integration for you to become whole. But here's the tragedy. You think you have time to avoid these things. You think you can face them later, after you've done everything else, once you're ready. But later never comes. Life ends. And you die having spent your entire existence avoiding what was most essential. You ran from yourself for decades, then ran out of time to find yourself. Think about what you're currently avoiding. What conversation do you need to have but keep postponing? What truth do you know but keep denying? What work do you need to do but keep substituting with easier tasks? What part of yourself do you need to face but keep distracting yourself from seeing? Whatever came to mind, that's probably where your essential work is. That's where your development is waiting. That's what you should be spending your limited time on. But you're not. You're avoiding it. And every day you avoid it is a day of your short life wasted on running from what you most need to face. Jung's challenge: stop avoiding what's essential. Face it now. Not someday when you're ready. You'll never feel ready. Not after you've handled everything else. There will always be something else. Now. This week. In your current limited time that's actively ticking away while you read this, have the conversation you're avoiding. Face the truth you're denying. Do the work you're resisting. Feel the grief you're numbing. Acknowledge the shadow you're projecting. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's essential. And your life is too short to spend it running from what's essential. Jung observed that people reach the end of life with devastating clarity about what they avoided, the conversation they should have had, the truth they should have faced, the work they should have done, the person they should have become. But by then, it's too late. The time they spent avoiding is gone. They can see clearly what mattered, but they can't go back and spend their time differently. Don't let that be you. Don't spend your short life avoiding what's essential. Face it now, while you still have time, while it can still create the meaning and development that makes your limited existence worthwhile. Face what you're avoiding in your short life. The essential is always what you're resisting. Stop running, start facing. Because the development you're avoiding is the development your limited time should be spent on. If these principles are landing, ruthlessly eliminating what doesn't matter, prioritizing consciousness over achievement, facing what you're avoiding, you're beginning to understand Jung's radical approach to spending a short life wisely. Before we explore the final principle about what actually matters most, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because this final principle reveals what Jung considered the most important thing you can do with your limited time, and what most people never do. Jung's fourth principle contains everything. In your life, the most important work, the only work that ultimately matters, is becoming who you actually are, not achieving something impressive, not accumulating anything external, but individuating into the authentic expression of consciousness you actually are beneath all conditioning, expectation, and performance. You're not here for very long, and in that brief time, you have one essential task: discover who you actually are and live from that authentic self. Everything else is secondary. Every other use of your time, no matter how impressive, is wasted if you never become actually yourself. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming an individual, undivided, whole, not copying anyone else's life, not fulfilling others' expectations, not performing the role culture assigned you, but discovering your unique nature beneath all the conditioning and living from it authentically for the limited time you have. This might sound simple, but Jung would say, it's the hardest work you'll ever do. Because becoming yourself requires going against almost everything you've been taught. It requires disappointing others, violating expectations, standing alone, thinking for yourself, living from your truth regardless of consequences. Most people can't do it. They spend their short lives being versions of other people, performing their parents' unlived lives, fulfilling culture's expectations, copying admired figures, conforming to collective standards. They die without ever discovering who they actually were beneath all the performance. They spend their entire limited existence being someone else. And at the end, when it's too late, they realize, I never lived my life. I lived everyone else's version of what my life should be. I died without ever meeting myself. But here's what makes this work essential. When you're being actually yourself, everything you do has meaning because it's authentic expression rather than performance. The time you spend becomes meaningful not because you're achieving impressive things, but because you're living as yourself. Your relationships become real instead of performative. Your work becomes expression instead of obligation. Your existence becomes yours instead of a copy of someone else's. Think about your current life honestly. How much of what you're doing is actually you? And how much is performance, living according to others' expectations, fulfilling roles you never chose, being who you're supposed to be rather than who you are? For most people, the honest answer is devastating. Maybe 20% of their life is actually theirs. The other 80% is performance, obligation, conformity. They're spending 80% of their limited time being someone they're not. Use your life to become yourself, not someday, now. This week, start making choices from your authentic self rather than your performed persona. Start living according to your actual values rather than inherited ones. This will create conflict. People who benefited from your performance won't like your authenticity. But Jung promised, the discomfort of becoming yourself is nothing compared to the regret of dying without ever having been yourself. The conflict you face for individuating is temporary. The regret of dying having never lived as yourself lasts until consciousness ends. You have limited time, maybe 3,000 weeks left, maybe less. Are you spending them becoming yourself or performing who you think you should be? Use your short life to become who you actually are. This is the only work that creates meaning that lasts beyond your limited time. Jung's fifth and final principle: remember constantly that you're going to die. Not to be morbid or depressing, but because death awareness is the antidote to wasting life. When you truly grasp that your time is limited and running out, you stop tolerating what doesn't matter and start prioritizing what does. Here's what Jung understood. Most people live in death denial. They know intellectually that they'll die someday, but they don't feel it. They don't let that reality penetrate their consciousness and inform their choices. So they live as if they have infinite time, postponing what matters, tolerating what drains them, spending years on trivialities. Death remains abstract, distant, unreal. Jung called this the denial of mortality, the psychological defense that keeps death at arm's length so you don't have to feel its urgency. And this denial allows you to waste your life, because when death feels distant, so does the imperative to live meaningfully. When you think you have unlimited time, you can always do what matters later. But death denial is killing you, not physically, but psychologically. You're dying slowly by wasting the limited time you have. But here's what Jung discovered. When you truly accept your mortality, when you feel in your bones that your time is running out, everything changes. What seemed important becomes trivial. What you were tolerating becomes intolerable. What you were postponing becomes urgent. Death awareness clarifies what actually matters with brutal precision. Jung emphasized that this isn't about becoming obsessed with death or living in fear. It's about using death as a guide for life. The awareness that you're dying right now, constantly, one moment at a time, sharpens your priorities. It eliminates what's inessential It reveals what's actually worth your limited time. Think about your life through the lens of death. If you knew you had only 1 year left, what would you immediately stop doing? What would you immediately start doing? What conversations would you have? What work would you abandon? What relationships would you repair or release? What would you finally admit to yourself about what you actually want? Those answers reveal what actually matters to you, but you're not living according to those answers. You're living as if you have infinite time. You're tolerating what you'd immediately eliminate if you felt death's urgency. You're postponing what you'd immediately prioritize if you accepted your mortality. Jung's practice: meditate on death regularly, not obsessively, but honestly. You're going to die, maybe in 50 years, maybe tomorrow. Your life will end. And when it does, what will have mattered? This perspective, the view from your deathbed looking back, clarifies everything. What seemed crucial becomes irrelevant. What you were avoiding becomes essential. But here's what makes death awareness transformative. It doesn't make life meaningless. It makes meaning possible. When you truly grasp that you have limited time, you stop wasting it. You stop tolerating toxic relationships because you don't have years to waste on people who drain you. You stop pursuing achievements that mean nothing because you don't have decades to spend on empty success. You stop postponing conversations because you might not get another chance. Death awareness creates urgency around what matters. It eliminates tolerance for what doesn't. It forces you to ask constantly, is this how I want to spend my limited time? Is this worthy of the irreplaceable moments I'm giving it? Would I choose this if I knew I was dying? Jung observed that people who live most fully are those who've integrated death awareness. They're not morbid or fearful. They're focused and urgent about what matters. They've used death as a clarifying force that eliminates what's inessential and prioritizes what's essential. They're dying consciously rather than unconsciously, and that consciousness transforms how they live. Once a week, sit quietly and contemplate, I'm going to die. My time is limited. It's running out right now. Then ask, given this reality, what needs to change? What am I tolerating that I need to eliminate? What am I postponing that I need to start? What am I performing that I need to drop? What am I avoiding that I need to face? Let death awareness clarify your priorities. Let it create urgency around what matters. Let it eliminate tolerance for what doesn't. Use death to live. That's Jung's final principle for life. Remember constantly that you're dying. Let that truth guide how you spend the limited time you have. Let me bring Jung's 5 principles together for spending your short life wisely. Stop doing what doesn't matter. Ruthlessly eliminate the waste consuming your limited time. Prioritize consciousness over achievement. Internal development matters more than external accumulation. Face what you're avoiding. The essential is always what you're resisting. Become who you actually are. This is the only work that ultimately matters. And remember, you're going to die. Use death awareness to clarify what's worth your limited time. Jung would say, these 5 principles violate almost everything culture teaches. Culture says, fill your life with obligations, prioritize achievement, avoid discomfort, be who you're expected to be, and deny death. Jung says, eliminate obligations that don't serve meaning, prioritize consciousness, face discomfort that develops you, become actually yourself, and use death to live fully. You have limited time, probably around 3,000 weeks left. You're spending one of them right now. It's disappearing. The only question is, are you spending it wisely? According to Jung's principles, spending it wisely means eliminating what doesn't create meaning, developing consciousness instead of just achieving, facing what you need to face, becoming actually yourself, and living with death awareness that clarifies your priorities. If you're doing these 5 things, you're spending your life wisely. If you're not, you're wasting your limited existence, and you're running out of time to change that. If you've made it this far, Jung would tell you, you know you're not spending your limited time wisely. Something in you recognized the truth in these principles, and you're running out of time to change that. Stop waiting. Stop preparing for a life you'll start living later. You're spending your actual life right now, this week, today. And if you're not spending it on what matters, you're wasting it. Start this week. Eliminate one thing that doesn't matter. Spend 1 hour on consciousness development. Face one thing you've been avoiding. Make one choice from your authentic self. Spend 5 minutes contemplating your mortality. Not perfectly. Just start. Because you don't have time to waste years preparing to live. You need to start living now while you still have time. You still have time. Maybe 3,000 weeks, maybe less. But you have some time. Use it. Not perfectly, but consciously. Not achieving, but becoming. Not performing, but living. Your life is short. Spend it wisely. Spend it on what actually matters. Spend it becoming who you actually are. Because at the end of your limited weeks, that's the only thing that will have mattered. If you're ready to stop wasting your short life and start spending it on what matters, subscribe to this channel. Join thousands learning to live consciously in their limited time, using Jung's wisdom. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.